Yeah, we're late.
Yeah, we're late. Ladies and gentlemen, variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite, and once again, I have forgotten to give everybody their orders, so go ahead and tick that one off on the bingo card. Go ahead. Whoever wants to go.
I'm James, also known as Aramithius. Silence. ...
I usually go last, so I just sit and wait. I'm Andrew, also known as the White Guar.
And I am Felix, also known as Banu Hanamasaichi.
And today we are talking about Clavicus Vile in our continuing coverage of the various Daedric princes. Roll for initiative. And I got a 1. I got a 2. Balls. So I actually have a real soft spot in my heart for Clavicus Vile. I think the reason why is because, I mean, I've brought this up many times before in our Daedra casts. I feel like the Daedra don't really fit the roles that they're kind of metaphysically assigned to as being like the backbones of reality in many cases, with the exceptions being, time, space, etc. But then, Julianos doesn't really work. But what I like about a lot of the Daedra is they fit the sort of next order, the next gradiency up of complexity, of cultural, mythological complexity. So you have, for example, Azura, the god of, or the Daedric prince who represents transitions, if you want to look at it that way. And then I like Clavicus Vile because he represents the sort of like the concept of making deals, and being and sort of the lesson. So I'm hitting a lot of points really rapidly here, but my sort of headcanon, I guess you could say, of the Daedra is that, and from a very Dunmer perspective, is that they are there to teach you a very harsh lesson. And Clavicus Vile's lesson is you got to be careful what you wish for, and you got to be careful how you wish for it. So when you make deals, you have to be really, really careful how you make them, and you have to be very careful to honor them, and so on. And so a lot of Clavicus Vile's interactions with our player characters in video games is typically one of, I have a deal that needs to be made, and I need your help making it, or I have a deal that I need to get out of, or someone else is trying to get out of, and we have to make this good. And that's kind of Clavicus Vile's sphere, is sort of is one of a deal maker, and depending on who's writing him, you will see variations of that along the lines of, the typical monkey's paw trope of like, well, he makes a deal with you, but then he makes it really, really horrible, and you end up wishing you never had the deal.
Yeah, it's like a deal with the devil, and he's got literal horns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he's got literal horns. Yeah, and he's also a Daedric prince who has a somewhat more unusual appearance than a lot of the other princes, in the respect that he's almost always pictured with horns. He's almost always pictured as, I swear to God, he looks like a Bosmer, like a shorter person, and he always has this fucking dog.
Yeah.
So one of the first questions I want to pose to you guys for discussion is, why the dog?
Oh, I got theories, man.
Well, hit me. Yeah, that's what I want.
So I've kind of been working on this theory that all the Atata are inherently dualistic.
I'll get him a link, hold on.
And so
what I wanted. That's why. Go ahead.
So if like I mentioned in the Azura cast a couple weeks ago, the dawn and dusk, like they're two opposite things that are also kind of the same. So with Clavicus Vile, I've always seen that we got Clavicus, we got Barbas. Those are two parts of the same whole. And so at some point, the entity that became Clavicus and Barbas said, well, I have all these bargains I want to make and no one to make them with. So I'm just going to split a part off, which we know he can do.
That sounded very lewd, by the way.
Umbra is a good example. Umbriel was stolen from the Fields of Regret. So with this relationship, Clavicus Vile as the quintessential bargain maker, he needs someone necessarily to get the short end of the deal, and Barbas is that part. So he is simultaneously the winner and the loser in his own bargains with himself.
Often, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I think that's why Barbas a lot of the time he operates almost as a conscience, because he knows what it's like to lose, and so he often, not always, as seen in ESO, he often will help the player character basically get out of the negative aspects of whatever deal this is, which happens in Skyrim.
I'm not sure totally, because I was thinking that if a Daedric prince is entirely self-contained and not part of, and doesn't have any sort of symbiosis with anything, or any kind of mixing with anything, how do you make deals? So Clavicus, kind of, as you say, kind of has to make deals with himself, was about as far as I could think of with Barbas. The riddle for me is why Barbas is a dog.
Right.
No, hang on. I got
You got something for that? Okay, go for it.
Yeah, well, I think I do. Bear with me. So it does say in the lore that like, I don't know why Barbas is a dog specifically, but Clavicus Vile at some point says that on sunny days is when Barbas likes to be a dog. But Barbas has also been Creeper the Scamp for the old school players who played Morrowind. And Clavicus Vile says something along the lines of, when he's like this, I think he's somewhere else. It's all quite significant, of course, but who knows what that means. Yeah, I know, typical fucking Clavicus Vile fashion.
Such a non-answer.
Right? Yeah. I know, but it does raise the intriguing point of, okay, so then what is the significance of Barbas, whether he's in the form of a dog or another lesser Daedra, or I don't know, he takes the form of the bitter cut, maybe. Like, I don't know, but what is the significance of Barbas going off and doing his own thing? What is the
I can answer that.
That can be inferred from the abandonment? And yeah, okay. If you have an answer for that.
So ESO expands on that a little bit. And basically the short answer is the reason why Barbas takes the form of a dog is because him and Vile share a master/servant role.
Okay. Okay, and why is that necessary for Clavicus's idiom, so to speak, for his purpose? As a
so Vile is narcissistic as hell, and he likes being, I guess you could say, dominant over certain things.
He wanted a lapdog.
Yeah.
So you would say that Clavicus Vile's influence is, or his sphere is not necessarily about making deals for the sake of the deal, but rather making deals so that he has advantages over people.
Yes.
Okay. So in that respect, it makes him similar to Molag Bal, obviously, as the god of domination, but Molag Bal is more of a total control of an absolute authority, whereas Clavicus Vile is more of a sort of, I want an advantage, I want people to owe me, whereas Molag Bal wants to own people.
Yeah. And the interesting case with Barbas is that he sort of acts like the embodiment of Vile's conscience.
Yeah, I think Andrew was touching on that earlier, that Barbas is like Clavicus Vile's little Jiminy Cricket. It's his conscience.
Yes, exactly. He's the voice of reason.
And like I said, I mean, I think that comes from an empathy that he shares with people who get the shit end of the deal.
No, that is definitely something that Molag Bal does not possess.
Because I mean, Barbas is so used to getting beaten around, metaphorically or literally speaking, that he says, you know what, fuck this guy. Even though I'm part of him, I think I want to one up him for once, and so, oh hey, champion of Cyrodiil, hey, come here. I've got a horrible Brooklyn accent to sell you.
Yeah. Please try to ignore me.
Yeah.
Hey,
No,
Don't think too hard
about it.
Actually, I really like when Barbas has a Brooklyn accent. That's probably my favorite thing ever.
It's so weird, but I can't object to it. I mean, what? So like the idea of it talking, like Barbas himself mentions, there's like flying dragons and the end of the world, and a talking dog is what's gonna freak you out. Yeah.
So like Dylan was saying, master servant relationship. I mean that's definitely kind of what I was driving at. Clavicus Vile needs to be on top of the deal. He needs to be the one with the advantage, but that means someone has to be, drawing the short straw, and so that's where Barbas comes in. We do know that Barbas can shapeshift. We've seen him do it on screen. He did it in ESO at towards the end of the Morrowind expansion for ESO. Spoiler alert if you haven't done it. I mean, it's been out for like 3 years, so get after it. But
aye, aye, sir.
Yeah, so Barbas has this plan he's been unfolding to steal the divine essence of Vivek, and he wants to give it to Clavicus Vile. Well, he wants to use it to find the Clockwork City and give that to Clavicus Vile. It's funny because it's really the first time we see Barbas in an actual adversarial role
and operating independently.
Yeah. He says, "Oh, I'm doing this for my master. I'm such a good dog," and he talks like that. But when he talks to us, he's actually in the shape of a Scoffin, which is interesting. He's really tall, blonde-haired Daedra with horns, and he's wearing like a black robe. And I found that interesting. He also took on the shape of the Archcanon. Archcanon Tarvis, I think was his name.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
After he died in his sleep, Barbas like slipped in, was like, "Oh, I'm gonna assume your identity, and I'm just gonna, move things in the way I want them." And then
good morning, honey.
Yeah, show me them games.
Daddy's awake.
And so yeah, that's interesting in that storyline, how that's really one of the only times we see him acting independently against the player, and he's doing something specifically for the benefit of Clavicus Vile. Clavicus Vile is really, really frustrated with him because of this. He says, "No, there are things in motion that you don't understand, dog. You're just getting in the way of things." And of course, he's talking about the events that eventually occur in Somerset. But then later, Clavicus Vile transports you to what looks like a pocket dimension. It's just there's just a statue of Clavicus Vile there, and he says, "Oh, be nice to my dog. He was just trying to please me. So you're gonna stay here for 1,000 lifetimes to think about, everything you did wrong." And then Barilzar shows up. Is like, "Yeah, come with me. Let's get the fuck out of here." So
yeah.
One thing though that I realized is because he got here late, Nexus should introduce himself to the chat so people know who he is.
Yes.
Oh yeah, my bad. I forgot to do that. For all people watching, hi, my name's Dylan, but I go by Nexus in the lore community.
And one of the things that I wanted to mention, that I wanted to talk about, is probably one of the more famous Daedric artifacts in the and certainly in Oblivion and Skyrim is Umbra, the sword, which I think, which is definitely something that Clavicus Vile takes credit for creating, although he technically contracted out for that. But One of the reasons,
Subcontractors, yeah.
the sword plays a major role in the novels, but the role that it plays doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Clavicus Vile. It's more that they just needed a Daedric artifact, if I recall correctly, and I may not. But what's interesting about Umbra is that despite all these. Despite Clavicus Vile's interest in making deals and controlling people, all Umbra does is steal people's souls and supposedly, I guess, send it off to Clavicus Vile, but who knows? And that seems a little narrow. Like, it doesn't really fit his idiom. And I was wondering if any of you guys had an explanation for why that might.
He does have an interest in souls specifically, though. Because Nagasta had a similar deal. It's literally that Nagasta would provide Vile with souls, and Vile would help Nagasta in some way that I don't think ever really gets specified. But he does have an interest in souls for souls' sake, and everything that you can do with them.
Okay, just for the raw power of it, then. Yeah.
That's what I can tell. But
I mean, I was always under the impression that Clavicus Vile liked having souls simply for the sake of having them. Like he's just got a big box somewhere. Yeah. Look at all these souls I got. It's a nice collection.
Yeah,
well,
that's actually.
He's like that meme. Why can't I hold all these souls?
Why can't I hold all these souls?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing about Vile, or with Umbra actually. So with Vile, he just loves souls. Like he just loves having them. And in the Infernal City novel, after the Red Year happens, when the Ministry of Truth is about to crash into Vivek City, Two Dunra create a device capable of using souls as a power source to keep it afloat.
Right.
The Ingenium.
Yep. And it actually opens like a small rift to a Vile's realm, and Vile actually allowed it to stay open because he loved the souls coming in. Yeah.
Okay.
So Clavicus Vile was like a tapeworm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are being so kind to Clavicus Vile. It's like, yeah, he's basically looks like the devil. He talks like a used car salesman. Barbas is a guy from Brooklyn, and
I was about to. I was thinking, do we want to compare him to Littlefinger? Just with souls as his currency, just kind of collecting stuff, making things move. The artifacts that are seemingly more of a part of him than everything else. He's got more moving parts than any other Daedra, but as those parts move, he gains stuff. He can keep many more plates spinning in the same way that Littlefinger does.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because now I'm wondering, is it just me, or does Clavicus Vile have the most artifacts of any Daedra?
Well, he's got Bittercup, he's got
Bittercup, he's got the Mask of Clavicus Vile. He's got the Rueful Axe.
That's a good point.
He's got Umbra.
The Rueful Axe.
And I think there's like another one that I missed.
Oh yeah. I think it's called Fae Falcon. It's like a quill.
Yes.
It's a quill.
But like we don't know if it's actually real or not. Like
it comes from a book that's considered like fiction in the other scrolls.
That's right. Yeah, because I've seen the book and I'm sure I've read it, but
it's one of the best stories in the whole series as far as I'm concerned. It's just beautifully sinister. But yeah, I again never really got why Vile was in with that artifact. There's no deal explicitly made, and the student who identifies it as Vile's artifact is just, it seems like his style. Is the way he puts it. It is the granting of a wish, so to speak, and it is the kind of the monkey's paw wish type thing, but. There is no explicit pact made or anything like that. It just appears to enable someone to write their letters better, or write their newsletters better.
Right.
So I'm not really sure what Vile would have gained out of that. There is someone who sells a dodgy soul gem in order to make it work.
are we talking about Fae Falcon still?
Yeah.
Okay, because as I pulled up the article on it, and the brief synopsis says that over time the quill starts to force the user to write foreboding messages of suicide, and then once that person actually commits suicide, then that soul goes to Clavicus Vile. So it almost seems like Clavicus Vile playing with his food. He's, no, this is an investment I'll make dividends on later. So is he a stock market broker?
Hence why I was thinking Littlefinger.
Yeah.
Well,
Chaos ladder.
You know what? He might be, because Clavicus Vile, and I think it's about time we also sort of bring this into the conversation. He's one of two considered patrons for the Cyrodiil Vampirum Order.
Yeah.
And their whole thing, as I'm sure Dylan is well aware of, is that not with numbers, but just by placing themselves in strategic parts of Cyrodiilic society, they can control all of Tamriel so long as there's an empire behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the broad idea. So I don't know how that necessarily works with vampires. Like I think somewhere it says that he taught them how to blend into society.
Yeah, he taught them how to appear as mortal and control society.
Yes, that's it exactly. So it kind of makes me wonder, what does he get out of that? Like, he's not getting too many souls, at least not directly. But I guess it's an intriguing way of a Daedra somehow expanding their influence throughout Tamriel.
Yeah, that's what I've always figured it was.
Okay.
Because was there any deal cut with the order specifically? Because
they mention in their book Cyrodiil Vampirum Order or something like that, that they pledge allegiance to their two patrons, Molag Bal, who created vampires, and Clavicus Vile, who taught them how to be like better, as it were. So he's definitely like officially part of their scene.
I can just imagine like a the Vampire the Masquerade kind of nightclub.
Yeah.
Everyone's wearing Clavicus Vile masks, and it's just
peak goth culture.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of information on them, so
boots and cats and boots and cats.
Aside from their two books, a lot of what you'll find on them is a conjecture.
Yeah, because the line that kind of outlines their relationship with Vile is, for him we live amidst mankind and twist them to our will from offices of power.
Yeah.
So that's doing them for Vile. So I still getting with the mercantile images, but are they kind of doing some kind of Clavicus Vile franchise? Kind of we can fix you up with some...
Is this?
Come on down to Vile Viles. We got pizza. We got child casino.
Mechanical Rat, child casino, and pizza.
But yeah, having a Camarilla, so to speak, to manipulate things for to Vile's ends, indicates that he's either doing some politics that we really have no idea about for some reason, or it's simply a place for him to be to have influence over something. Because it also depends on what his limits are in terms of granting deals as well, because Daedra can't do a whole lot on Mundus most of the time. So having some sort of political power and pull would enable where he can just appear to his worshippers and say, "And here is your list of assignments for today. Please do this in order to fulfill their wishes."
You bring up an interesting point there, because I don't know that. I mean, based on what you said, is it that Clavicus Vile directly gives power to, a specific individual, or does he, because he has so many plates spinning, he plays with this one to have an effect over here, which causes this guy to get more power?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot more subtle and indirect. And yeah, you know, if I tell this guy to assassinate this person over here, which creates a power vacuum in this hold, and then these people are gonna go for that, and you'll become
I wouldn't be at all
or
surprised if we ended up with a plot line in a game somewhere where Clavicus Vile ends up playing some very, very multi-layered Bene Gesserit type shit.
Yeah,
you know,
like fourth dimensional chess.
Right, yeah, like 5D chess or something, you know, 200 IQ moves and stuff, but like, you know, great big 5-head plans. But I think that,
He's got those horns. It's a 6-head at least.
Yeah. But I think, I think that, that we like, wouldn't you kind of expect to see, like, as a Bethesda or ZeniMax writer, wouldn't you kind of expect fans to expect to see a plot like that from, like, Boethia or Mephala? You know, the web spinner,
definitely.
Prince of Plots. You know,
I mean,
Didn't
I would
work with Mephala and Boethia and like
Mephala
some
on
Daedra questions.
It was
also?
Mephala Nocturna during the
Nocturnal,
they were the Triad. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
That's
Triad.
it, yes.
They were trying to
And-
basically take over Nern.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
It's
Just another Tuesday.
It's kind of a big dick move for those three, I think. I don't
it's my opinion that they were trying to form an enantiomorph. One of them wanted to become the ruling king, and that's why they were targeting other Daedric cults in Somerset, because they wanted all the mythopoeic power to go to them, whoever it is that became the king, and then they all tried to be the thief. And that's why the enantiomorph failed.
And there was their requisite betrayal, which is what fucked the whole thing up.
Yeah,
They were this close, just this.
I mean, and then, but then Nocturnal kind of swooped in, was like, "Oh, I see an opening." Whoop.
Yep.
And then Vile gets pissed off and he goes, "I wanted to betray them first."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn you.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna stab you in the back. You don't get to stab me in the back.
Because given Vile's role with pacts and fulfillment of wishes in a way, I'm surprised that he didn't fulfill the observer role within the Triad.
Yeah, I actually I was like when I was playing that quest, I kept thinking to myself, like, okay, there's 3 of them. If we're lucky, there's going to be an enantiomorphic event of some kind. I just have to watch for the betrayal. One of them is going to betray the other one, and I was trying to figure out which one of them was the observer, because, again, your mileage may vary, but typically the observer is the one who gains the power from the or gains wisdom or knowledge or something from the enantiomorph. But nothing really stuck out. Nothing made it really obvious. And I mean, I only really thought about it as long as I was actually playing the quest, so I didn't go back and like analyze it very heavily. But
I mean, I think this can kind of tie back into Clavicus Vile's narcissism that we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
He didn't want to be the observer. He wanted to be he wanted to be the head man in this enantiomorph. He wanted to become the king.
Yeah.
He wanted to topple the existing king and then, become. He wanted to be on top. That's what he does. That's why Barbas exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so because he wasn't satisfied with being, with playing second fiddle, as the observer, whether he would have benefited from that or not, I mean, it kind of makes me think of that phrase, "Bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush." He could have gone for the bird in the hand, but he's gonna go for the 2 in the bush, and they both flew away, and
that's what bit him in the ass. Yeah,
that's so it's almost like he gambles himself. So it's I mean, bargains and risk taking are like he can't resist the opportunity to take a risk if the payoff is high risk, high reward.
He does strike me like his reputation or his sphere as being a deal maker does strike me as the kind of thing that as a writer might be able to exploit to feed in a sort of a gambling addiction into Clavicus Vile's personality, and one of the things that I remember from reading about gambling addictions for some reason, I can't remember why I was doing it, but for some reason or other I was reading about gambling addictions, and what they said.
Bored, you were curious.
I don't remember. Look, I mean, it's Elder Scrolls lore. You end up reading about all kinds of bullshit, so it's probably related to that. But
true.
One of the things that I read was that the reason was that gamblers need to lose. They have to lose. If they do nothing but win, then it gets boring. Obviously, they lose the adrenaline rush and so on. But losing is the best motivator they have for continuing to gamble. Like, well, I'm down. The house is up on me. If I don't keep gambling, I won't be able to eventually get back up again.
Yeah, that makes me think of there's an episode of the Twilight Zone, the OG black and white episodes where it's a pretty famous episode. But there's actually two that kind of fit into this. But there's one where this guy he's I think he's dead and he's in heaven, and he's going down to gamble and he's winning every time, and he's like, there's no risk. It doesn't get my blood, like I know I'm gonna win. Where's the fun? And he ends up saying, I can't do this anymore. I want to go to the other place. Take me to the other place. And the guy goes, sir, this is the other place.
I remember reading in a few books, because like Chris, one day I just found myself looking up about gamblers and how they think. And one of the things they talk about is that a lot of casinos are designed in such a way so that it helps keep gamblers in what's called the zone. It's not about winning or losing. It's the zone. It's the right pull of the slot machine, the bright lights and the noises that go through. And oh, I just missed it. Oh, well, we go again. And I just missed it. We go again. It's the zone about them. And when they win, it takes them out of that.
Yeah. It's the neural feedback that they're getting is not an adrenaline feed off of winning. It's from the experience of doing it. It's like it's a little bit like why people go fishing. People don't fish to catch fish. They fish to fish. That's the appeal of fishing, is the fishing. There are people who go out and fish and all they want to do is catch the biggest fucking fish, and they're really competitive about it and stuff. And they usually see these assholes on the back of boats with like huge reels trying to pull in like tuna and stuff because they want like that big fish adrenaline rush. But the guys that you see out on the lake with their bobber in the water not catching shit are really happy. they are not out there to catch fish. They're out there to fish. And it's because...
Well, you hope they're happy. Maybe they're just drunk on beer.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Which is the other motivation to go fishing.
Right. It's my dad used to fish a lot, and he said, and he echoed this sentiment. He said that it really wasn't like he would never go out to fish without food in like the camp, because he doesn't want to have the pressure of having to be able to fish. He just wants to go out and feed feed worms to fish, basically, is the way you put it. I'm just out here to feed the fish. And because to him, I don't think he realized this, he might have, he's a brainy dude, is that he would get out there and cast this rod, and his bobber would go out there, and what he was basically doing was staring at a single point in a very placid lake. See what I mean? Just one little dot in a very wide, placid field. And whether he knew it or not, he probably did, he was meditating. It was self-hypnosis.
Yep.
And I can't believe that he's the only person in the world who felt like that. There's probably a lot of fishermen out there, I guess, air quotes, amateur fishermen, who probably feel that way. Whether they know it or not, when they're out there you've heard people, the cliche is, when I'm out there on the lake fishing, everything just makes sense and I relax. It's it's because you're out there experiencing the Tao, and it helps a lot to bring a couple of beers. But how the fuck do we get onto fishing?
Why Clavicus Vile is making these deals with mortals for that sort of
why he's a gambler, and where the risk is for Clavicus Vile. It's an interesting parallel to say that it's an interesting parallel to say that Clavicus Vile has things in common with Molag Bal in the respect that he likes to own people, air quotes, or that he's about possession. But what I'm wondering is, I mean, we have established that Clavicus Vile does enjoy the accruance of souls, the acquisition of souls, of just like money. He doesn't, if you think of souls like money for Daedra, Clavicus Vile does not mind being rich. Who the fuck doesn't? It's not a burden. But at the same time, I suspect that just from his, and I'm hoping Nexus will back me up on this, because I don't think I'm going out on a limb here, but it seems to me like Clavicus Vile enjoys the actual act of the deal, of making the deal, of screwing somebody over, of not screwing somebody over, of getting things to work out, and if the gambler's attitude applies, then Clavicus Vile enjoys not getting. He may not like getting shorted on a deal, but he might, in a way, in the same way that a gambler enjoys losing, Clavicus Vile might enjoy not getting the upper hand in a deal, either breaking even or otherwise.
We actually see this in Red God when Cyrus goes to Vile's realm and tries to get his sister's soul back.
Yeah. Into that.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was literally just looking up some of the lines, but yeah, I got that. I got that sense when I've seen those get played through. Is the idea of well, you could do this. I could give this to you, but what would I gain? And just kind of he sits there kind of playing with Cyrus.
Make it interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although ultimately he does hold up his end of the deal, even though it doesn't work to his advantage.
Well, but that's what I mean, is that even if Clavicus Vile doesn't understand it, assuming I'm not making a mistake by attributing human behavior to a Daedra, which is almost definitely a dumb idea. In fact, now I feel really dumb bringing it up. but if for the sake of argument, if you were trying to write Clavicus Vile, that might be a good angle to take. Is that Clavicus Vile, if the camera kept rolling after the scene was over and Clavicus Vile had just gotten shorted, or he hadn't gotten exactly what he wanted, you could have a sort of the idea of Clavicus Vile just sort of, he's got that spark in his eyes again. He's got that energy that he didn't have before, and now it's sort of back in him, that motivation to get back on top again. Well, now I lost on that one. Oh, that's okay. We're gonna get up. We're gonna dust ourselves off, and we're gonna really screw the next guy. We're really gonna put it to him, and that's exciting for him. It's just, I mean, there are some Daedra, in my opinion, that are hard to write adventures for. And I'm saying this because I've been trying to. There are Azura is. It's tough. I mean, if it's not, help, I need one of my priestesses is sick or something, or some injustice is being done somewhere and I'm sending out the bat signal or something. If it's not something like that, it's really hard to, Azura bat signal. It's really hard for me to think about Azura from a constructive kind of, let's create a quest for Azura. But Clavicus Vile writes his own scripts.
Accepted.
Huh?
A challenge accepted for trying to write interesting quests. I'm intrigued now.
Well, yeah, but but my counterpoint is that Clavicus Vile practically writes his own scripts. It's easy to do, which makes it a useful tool.
I like to think I've written some interesting Daedra scenarios. I wrote one for Clavicus Vile too. I actually portrayed him as an actual child because that seemed a lot more fun to me. So he's just this kid in a giant throne wearing a mask much too big for him.
That's a good visual.
Yeah. He is
Yeah.
called the child
That's
god
adorable.
of the morning star by the
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
This is true. Why the Morning Star, though? I'm not sure I've ever seen a convincing argument for that.
Satan.
Lucifer connection, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And his summoning
I-
day, his summoning day is on the first of the morning star.
Good job. There it is.
Yeah. But no, it just feels like there's quite a bit of kind of traditional devilry imagery with Vile, and I'm not really sure quite where it goes, because there's the Morning Star. Because my mind immediately went, why Lucifer? He's not the most devilish of people. But then you've got pacts, so making a deal with the devil, and
Right.
I look at him and I think
The literal horns.
And literal horns. Yeah, so maybe at one point or another there may have been a couple of writers at Bethesda early on who like went back when they're maybe Clavicus Vile is one of the demons from their D&D campaign, and whoever was writing him was thinking of him as a very stereotypical, red tights, face paint, little horns, hooves, etc. Maybe that. I mean, doesn't he have hooves?
No, but he has hairy breeches in Redguard and Daggerfall, I think.
That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm thinking maybe that was like the maybe he was supposed to be like the impish kind of, deal making demon, sell your soul to the devil kind of thing. And then over the years, other writers have tried to make him a little more interesting.
Yeah, he's got a lot of Mephistopheles about him.
Yes.
But
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. White Guar's got to go.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
Yeah, it's a. I agree. It's the Faustian. That's the fucking thing I kept trying to think of. The Faustian deal is definitely a very much kind of a Clavicus Vile kind of plot line. If anybody is actually interested in Faust, there's a couple of, at least 2 productions on YouTube that I found, and one of them is actually a recording of an old German, I think it's German, film of Faust that is, it doesn't exactly follow the play, which is a shame, because Faust is actually one of the myths that Jung spends more than a little bit of time talking about, because the original...
There's one for the bingo card.
The air quotes original version of Faust has some extraordinarily symbolic scenes in it, including Faust having to go down to the darkness of the hells or something like that, or into a world of darkness, and steal a key from 3 wise women, 3 old mothers, that's what it was, who sit underneath a pyramid, which is about as fucking Gnostic as you can get. They sit around a fire in a room of darkness, and you have to approach the fire without them seeing you to steal a key, and they're sitting underneath a pyramid of sticks, I think. I can't remember exactly. It's been a couple of months since I read it. And it's just so fucking Gnostic, it's ridiculous. He's stealing a key, which is a phallic power symbol, and...
So, Chris, I just gotta say, I love how you use Gnostic the way a California surf dude uses the word gnarly.
It's so fucking Gnostic, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's Gnostic as fuck, bro.
And I try really hard not to use the same term over and over again on this in this cast, and I fail every time.
Yeah. Although that makes sense just purely from the basis of where I seem to remember that Faust was. I may be horribly wrong with this, but Goethe's inspiration was Persian, I think. So if there are some bizarre, odd symbols in it, you could perhaps chalk them up to some interpretation of Zoroastrianism. But
Yep.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Totally irrelevant aside. Over.
Well, I'm also looking for. Okay, so when we talk about, so I'm trying to incorporate more of the major arcana into these casts, and because I mean I'm reading a lot about it, and I'm trying to leverage this shit because otherwise I'm just wasting my time. And one of the here we go, the devil, the tower, the moon. Okay. So one, like there, as many people are usually pretty quick to point out, there's not really that many super negative cards in the tarot, and even the devil is not nearly as bad as you might think. By the way, if you're looking at that card thinking that's a penis, then yeah, you're right. That's that's exactly that. Yeah. Yeah, right, okay. And so
taken off Twitch.
And there and terms of service violation. And one of the aspects of the devil is that it has a as I suppose as the card goes, is that it can represent the idea of a deal being struck. This sort of goes back to the Mephistopheles kind of I guess what's the word, a cultural myth notes, I guess you want to say, like cultural tunes, tropes that are that were flying around a lot during the development of early tarot card systems. And so the devil, typically in a Mephistophelian kind of way, is associated with the idea of making deals with an entity that doesn't have your best interests in mind. But the one that's really tricky is the moon, which is a card about temptation. The problem with the moon, especially when it comes to
looks lewd.
Huh?
The moon looks lewd.
Oh, it's not nearly as bad as some of these cards, dude. It's the problem with the moon is that it's very it's distracting. It's in the Fool's Journey. It's actually a tower is technically the worst. In the Fool's Journey, the moon represents a point where the tower. All right, so there's the devil, then there's the tower, which is disaster. So the idea is that you face is that a disaster occurs after facing the devil, but that is then replaced by brought in with the star. So the star is an event in the Fool's Journey that denotes sort of the arrival of true power. If you want, you can think of this from an Elder Scrolls standpoint as being the point in which you gain the ability to attain Chim, or possibly the attainment of that state. And in the Tatterdemalion, that it is that point. And the reason why... Yes, the reason why the moon... Yeah, you attain Chim in the Tatterdemalion main plot. And in the moon is the phase immediately after that point, because the danger of attaining that level of power, of metaphysical knowledge, is that you have a tendency to just decide, well, this is all I'm going to do now. I'm just going to stay in this state. And the moon represents that temptation of no longer acting, of no longer using your power for good, for the betterment of yourself and the rest of humanity, and to just relax and be in that blissful state all the time. If you can imagine, like a Buddhist monk reaching enlightenment. Sorry?
Mm-hmm. I was just saying, it's basically stasis.
Yeah, it is. It is it's a state in which you, like if you think about it in terms of a Buddhist attaining enlightenment, of just attaining that state and then just staying in it all the time. And that's not, it's a dangerous state, because while it took an incredible amount of work to get there, now you're sort of like thinking, oh, well, this is great. I've reached my reward, and now I can stop. And, Vivek and Vile. Oh, balls. Yeah, we haven't talked about that. We'll get on that right now.
We'll get there.
And that at that point, you become sort of just lost, stuck. And that's the... that, I think, is... To bring this back to Clavicus Vile, it's one of the problems that Clavicus Vile has to avoid is making deals until he reaches a point where he no longer he's got everything he wants, and so the greed of Clavicus Vile is the thing that prevents him from reaching the star, the state of enlightenment, because he's never reaching that state of satisfaction, so he doesn't know how to move past that state of satisfaction, if that makes any sense.
Does that mean theoretically Clavicus Vile could potentially be the greedy man in Skull myth?
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that has interesting connotations then. Because there's for the whole history of men, because there's a throwaway note in the New Antiquity stuff in ESO that's talking about how the Kothringi worshipped Vile before they worshipped Zen, whichever was the primal version of Zenithar. So yeah, the idea of kind of making deals versus honest toil kind of links in with that. It's that striving but never attaining something of worth as well. Just to kind of tie that all in. And if he's kind of connected to the skull, I don't know quite how much we want to necessarily link the skull with the Kothringi. Is the only leap I'm trying to make. Yeah, which is mildly stumping me, but it's just food for thought. He gets into more places than we perhaps think. On that sort of a basis.
Well, Whitegwar wanted us to talk a little bit about the connection between Vivek and Clavicus Vile, and the only connection that I'm aware of was that Clavicus Vile was siphoning off Vivek's power during the Clockwork City expansion. Or just before it.
Was that definitely Vile? I thought that was just an Ashkan trying to become the Nerevering.
Okay, so in the Trial of Vivek...
Oh, well, it was Barbas who siphoned off power from Vivek, but...
In the Trial of Vivek, it says that Clavicus Vile is one of Vivek's lovers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh, spicy.
Now, I personally haven't figured that one out yet myself.
Well, I mean, it's not completely out of character, but Vivek it's sort of like Vivek's, sort of like he's, I don't know what the term is, like he's swinging below average or something. It's like he's batting down. It's a little bit like saying, I mean, Vivek's been fucking around with Molag Bal, for God's sake. I mean, you can't get any more dominant than that. Molag Bal doesn't even refer to Vivek as a person in the 36 lessons. Molag Bal actually calls Vivek an it, and it's like when you're dealing with that level of sociopath, Clavicus Vile is sort of like, why are you playing softball, man? Why are you?
No, because hang on. Saltasil says in the Clockwork City expansion, Vivek wants to be all things and
to everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah.
So by trying to just, hey, Clavicus Vile, you want in on this? Like that's the reason why.
Tell me you don't want some of this.
Because he's fundamental to the greater understanding of the world, right? Because and how it functions. The 8 spokes of the wheel and the 16 gaps in between. that's part of it, right? So that to me is all the explanation I need for why Vivek's hanging around with him. It's another check mark off the box.
Right.
Yeah. Plus, if you think about it in the right way, Vile's sphere of deals and cutting deals is pretty much how the relationships with the Daedra are supposed to go with the Dunner and the Chimer. That you're supposed to get something out of your interactions with them, or at least that's my take on it. The idea of cutting yourself into a better shape involves that improvement and that achievement. I mean, you can argue as to whether that's something like theft rather than a deal, or toil or something like that. But
it's theft instead of an exchange.
Yeah. It's but that basic idea that it's an exchange, that offer of servitude gets you something, is Vile's wheelhouse. So it would make sense to me that Vivek possibly had some sort of dealings with Vile before the pomegranate banquet. That it's not going back.
I will never look at pomegranates the same way again.
Yeah. But it's that idea of he was learning how to make those bargains so that he would be able to play hardball properly. It's not really important enough to merit a mention, but it was part of the process. That's how I would reconcile it anyway.
Yeah, there's no timeline put on that, is there, Nexus? About when Vivek was fooling around with Clavicus? Did we lose him?
Nope.
I don't know.
Question. Pass?
It could be that he's just like having to think really hard about it, or he's muted himself. I don't know. But
we don't ask easy questions. There he is.
Listen, what was the question?
Well, I'm saying, was there any mention of a timeline of when Vivek and Clavicus Vile were involved with each other?
I don't think so. It doesn't really give an estimate in the trial.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds a little bit like something somebody kind of just came up with.
Yeah, it's sort of like an obscure piece of lore that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out myself.
It's a good one.
We did have a question from the captain, asking, well, what's Vile's in-world reputation? Because if he's as bad as we're kind of making him out to be, that he's always looking to screw you over, why would you ever go?
Oh, people get desperate. I mean, look, the Rueful Axe, for example, is a great example. This guy, the guy who made a deal with Clavicus Vile, thought he had no other option. And what's the deal that he gets? I need to cure my daughter, and Clavicus Vile gives him an axe and goes, "This will cure her real fucking good."
He's
still
really
love that. I'm
sorry.
Imperials.
Like he's very popular in Cyrodiil.
Of course he would be.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because he's the patron of the Vampire Order, and I think it actually says in the lore. Good point, Nexus. It says on one of the lore pages or something that he's pretty popular amongst the races of men. So he's worshipped a fair bit in Cyrodiil, Skyrim, and High Rock. But not in Hammerfell, because ain't no good God-fearing Rudgar gonna trust Daedra.
Dang it.
And to expand on the Imperial thing, in the Imperial Census of Daedra Lords, written by Michael Kirkbride, it actually states that the Elder Council makes deals with Vile sometimes.
Yes, I remember that.
So I guess we could probably make the assumption, and it's probably safe to say, that the deals that you hear about in Elder Scrolls games and stuff are deals that are struck with Clavicus Vile that are noteworthy, but not the only
I can
ones.
see that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's his line in the invocation in the first Pocket Guide to the Empire is that he is the one who is always listening, or something to that effect. So, yeah, so it's just any opportunity. Any opportunity is like, oh, this is terrible. Well, have you considered? Sort of thing.
Can I talk to you today about Clavicus Vile?
Yeah.
Clavicus Vile here with another fantastic product. It's a communication mirror, but it traps you inside.
Now
How's
accepting
that, eh?
Twitch Prime.
Oh God. Actually, on the subject of Clavicus Vile and deals and sort of having enemies and allies, I think I recall reading somewhere that Ebenarm is his enemy.
Yeah,
like the
Ebenarm
rivals
hates
or
all
something
Daedra.
like that. Is what?
Ebenarm hates all Daedra, though.
Okay, fair enough, I guess. Yeah.
At least if I remember correctly, but yeah, it was in that. Back in the Daggerfall days of everything must have an entirely arbitrary web of allies and enemies, and yeah.
It's Daggerfall, dude. Politics, man. That's all them Bretons have.
Like it's high rock.
Yeah.
That's its jam.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Don't get me started. Fucking started. I actually rolled up a character to get in ESO to start doing the what do you call it, the Breton the High Rock quests, you know?
Yeah, the Daggerfall Covenant.
Yeah, the Daggerfall Covenant. Yeah, just because I was just like, you know, I need something different, and and my only recollection of the Daggerfall Covenant was from the only other character I have that I spent like 10 minutes playing in the Daggerfall Covenant, was that it starts off with a murder mystery, and I was like, oh, interesting. Like I was like I recall that being really like fun, and so I thought I would do that. But the problem is that ESO doesn't let you choose what starting experience you want, so I ended up in the back of a wagon in Skyrim. You know,
yeah, you were just trying to cross the border to Daggerfall.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to make a new character for Morrowind, and I really wanted to do that again. But yeah, hopefully eventually they'll let us choose.
Yeah,
seems like a no-brainer to me. But
according to some of the old school lore in there, Clavicus Vile is a powerful politician in Oblivion.
Why does that not surprise me?
I'm not like a fucking course he is. Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense.
I believe the line of text says, he's the consummate politician of Oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
vote for me for less taxes on lunar currency.
All about horse trading. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna build a liminal barrier, and I'm gonna make Vivek pay for it.
He's the Donald Trump of the Daedric princes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
I have all the best souls. They're fantastic souls. All my friends agree.
This has been the worst deal in the history of trade deals ever.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we should call it.
Yeah. So who's next? Somebody?
I'm kind of late to this. Have y'all discussed his Plane of Oblivion yet?
No, we
Daedra.
haven't.
Oh, actually, no, we haven't brought that up at all. Hermaeus Mora is next, but yeah. What do we know about what's it called? The something regret. Fields of Regret. Yeah.
Fields of Regret. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
Tranquil countryside dotted with majestic cities of glass and ornate buildings, populated by Scoffin.
Ooh, Scoffin. That's an interesting topic, though.
Dense forest, lakes, mountains, floating golden metals, and stone spirals filling the landscapes. It's a fucking prog rock album. That's what it is. It's the artwork to a prog rock album.
Yo, what do you have against King Crimson, my guy?
Hey man, I'm so prog. I listen to prog rock albums on shuffle.
Okay, all right, you win.
Yeah. Okay, so what?
Oh.
Yeah. So what can we talk about?
Oh, and that's where Umbriel came from. It was part of his.
Yeah,
force.
it was according to the Lord of Souls novel, it used to be a city in Vile's realm too.
Mm-hmm. What a whole city in the sword?
Yeah,
Okay.
a whole huge city. And apparently, according to Vile, Umbriel isn't its actual name either.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Do we know what its real name is then?
Yeah.
Nah, there's no information on it.
Yeah, and he'd also it was Umbriel, the whole was that the only area that was kind of farmed out to the hist of his place? Okay.
Yeah, there are actually histories that exist in Vile's realm. Pretty
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so cause
how much you want to bet he made a deal with the hist for that?
Probably.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So that's why they took it back at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, because because there was at least one history that essentially made an exodus to Cold Harbor, when it's implied to be around about the time that the Zanmir culture was about to disappear, and so there's some dissent within the hist. Some of them didn't want it to, so I wouldn't be surprised that if Clavicus Vile didn't jump on that bandwagon and say I can protect you from this. Given that they wound up in Cold Harbor, they must have wound up in the fields of regret. I can't see Vile missing that opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah. And...
Well, all I know is that from the description here, the fields of regret sound fucking cool. So.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty decent rum.
Yeah.
But like,
do you end up in it?
Reason, though.
Wait, do you actually end up going to the fields of regret at some point?
You go there in ESO.
Yeah, when?
During the Somerset quest line, like at the very end.
Shit, that means I went there and I don't even fucking remember it. I'll have to do it again.
And apparently, we're supposed to go there again in the future.
Oh, good.
Ooh. Yeah, and you go there in Redguard, but that's just kind of land of blockiness.
Yeah, exactly. It's blobby textures and low poly. Yeah.
Out rude shapes.
Okay, well, yeah. So yeah, hey, so we're doing Hermaeus Mora next, apparently. That's actually really good news because Hermaeus Mora is a very mythical. There's a lot to deconstruct in Hermaeus Mora. There's a lot.
Yep.
And there's a lot of little itty bitty hidden lore bits about Hermaeus Mora.
Hey.
And Freudian slip. And so that's a juicy topic. I'm actually going to try and get as much research as I can get done on Hermaeus Mora because that's going to be cool.
One more thing about Vile. The reason why his realm appears as a tranquil countryside is because he's the Daedric Prince of Serenity.
Oh, interesting.
That thing you always chase after but never quite get to.
Yes.
Grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Yeah.
Well, but that's not really serene. Daedric Prince of Serenity.
Clover, my guy, it's what Irish dreams are made of. That one really resonated with James, apparently.
I'm gonna have to. If you gave me a list of adjectives to describe Clavicus Vile, Serenity is not one of the ones I would use.
Well,
here's the line of text from it too.
Please.
Okay, so and this is from the Imperial census as well, and it says, and I quote, "Perhaps by rendering his domains as idyllic countryside, the prince exemplifies his greatest aspect, and that which ingrates him to his many followers, the power of serenity through wish fulfillment."
Oh,
yeah, that works.
It's politic. Works. It's the appearance of serenity. It's not actual serenity.
Yeah, it's the idea of what you want. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's the giant gold-plated tower with Clavicus or Vile on the front, you know.
Nice.
It's huge. The fields, they're so green. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I was fucking thrown.
Yeah, I should have worded it better, but yeah.
No. Like
good.
it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Of course, he's the prince that promises serenity. That makes absolute sense. And probably delivers. Like I said, we get the majority of our stories by Clavicus Vile are just the ones that are interesting and noteworthy, not the bulk of the work that he does, which is probably just straight like, okay, and I see that you've received your 50,000 septums as you asked for, and I've received the soul of your firstborn child. Very good. And here's your receipt. And this is my receipt for your receipt. Thank you very much.
Sign on the dotted line, and there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully 2 weeks from now, assuming something doesn't happen, Hermaeus Mora, I might ask for more time than that because typical of how things go, I'm now doing even more shit at work than I usually am. So,
yay.
Yeah. But
challenge though. How long can we go? How long can we go in the Hermaeus Mora cast without mentioning H.P. Lovecraft?
No.
I give it 30 seconds.
That's not a challenge I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, we're just talking about the next cast. So, okay. So, anyway, everybody, thanks very much for tuning in, and we will see you hopefully in 2 weeks. Everybody wave bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining
I don't have a
us.
webcam, so I